Good afternoon. Good afternoon. If any of you don't have seats, there's some up in front, so that please come up in front if you don't have a seat. I wanted to also ask people to please silence your cell phones, if you can remember to do that, and take note of the location of the emergency exits at the front and the rear of the auditorium. The Hood Museum of Art at Dartmouth is situated upon the ancestral and unceded lands of the Abenaki people. This acknowledgement reminds us of the significance of place, the continued existence of Indigenous people, and the museum and Dartmouth's commitment to building respectful relationships with those who call these lands home. We are here today, and forgive me if I'm rather long-winded, we are here today to celebrate and hear from the wonderful John Stomberg, Virginia Rice Kelsey 1961 S director, who has been at the helm of the Hood Museum of Art for the last 10 years. It's hard to believe, right, John? As many of you know, John is slated to retire in June, or actually he just told me now July. July 17th, actually. And this event is the first of many that will give us the opportunity to sing his praises. My name is Kathy Hart. Before retiring from the Hood in 2020, mid-COVID, I worked at the Hood Museum of Art for 30 years in a variety of roles, and through the tenure of 6 of the 7 directors since it first opened in 1985. During my last 4 years at the museum, from 2016 through 2020, I had the great privilege of working for my friend, John Stomberg. One of the things that's always stood out about John is his deep love and enthusiasm for his fellow human beings, as well as for the visual arts. And I think they run neck and neck, maybe, I don't know. He came, people. He came about the latter avocation first as a budding undergraduate filmmaker at Mass Art in Boston. Upon deciding that making films was not in the cards, John took a break from his BFA and took the direction of becoming a chef. As much as he liked cooking, and still does, he makes a mean rainbow cake, right? He soon decided to resume undergraduate studies at the ripe old age of 24 at Georgetown and began studying another related passion of his, the history of art. Now fascinated and intellectually engaged, there would be no more forays into other careers. Abstract art and modernism, particularly in painting and photography, was and remains something that has always spoken to John. Although many of you know John through his work as a curator and director of academic museums, Boston University, then Williams College Museum of Art, Holyoke, and then the Hood, John has also had a rich life as a scholar, so bear with me while I give you some details. John first worked on his master's at BU by writing about the role of technology in the pastels of Morton Stomberg, an American modernist painter and photographer. He received his PhD also at BU in art history in 1999 with a dissertation titled Art and Fortune, Machine Age Discourse and the Visual Culture of Industrial Modernity, which dealt with the heyday of Fortune and Life magazines and the photographic work of Margaret Burke-White, among other things. While at BU, he went on not only to teach art history, but also direct the gallery and curate a wide variety of exhibitions there. At Williams and then Holyoke, he worked with Ellsworth Kelly on an exhibition of Matisse drawings, and also exhibitions on Judy Pfaff, Kara Walker, Edward Steichen, Barbara Takanaga, war photography, and contemporary German photography. Alongside his curatorial role, he authored BU gallery publications, contributed essays to museum catalogs, wrote exhibition and book reviews and essays for edited volumes. Another continuing subject for him has been the role and importance of academic art museums, and he's become a leading advocate for their importance in a liberal arts institution. His career at the Hood began in 2016. Timing is everything, and the museum closed only 3 months after he began the position as director. The closure was to accommodate the Hood's long-planned expansion to the original Charles Moore building, which was designed by the award-winning architects Todd Williams and Billy Chen, about to open the Obama Library. During the closure, which would last almost 3 years, he collaborated closely with his curators on the hanging and disposition of the galleries for the grand opening of its building in January 2019. This rehanging would foreground the global nature of the Hood's collections and signal a new way to orient collections in a museum. Never letting the grass grow under his feet, John also came up with a brilliant solution to the shuttering of the museum space and what would soon be its 3-year absence in the lives of Dartmouth undergraduates, faculty, alums, and the community. He championed the opening of a one-room temporary exhibition space on Hanover's Main Street, which he titled Hood Downtown, and he himself curated many of those exhibitions with a lot of very important artists. In advance of the reopening of the museum in 2019, John began by hiring the Hood's first curator of Native American art, the brilliant Jamie Powell, a member of the Osage Nation, and who is now serves as the Associate Director of Curatorial Affairs and Curator of Indigenous Art. Once the Hood reopened in 2021 after the closure caused by COVID, John, faced with the diminished staff due to retirements and attrition, gradually grew the Hood's personnel roster through the college endowments, grants, and generous donations from the Hood Board and Dartmouth alums. New curators Michael Hartman, Elisa Swindell, Elizabeth Madison, Ashley Offill, Haley Chang were hired along with Alex Bordelot, an African specialist and new deputy director. He also grew the support staff and started the 3-year Hood Museum Board of Advisors Mutual Learning Fellowship, a program which gives young aspiring museum professionals an opportunity right out of college to gain experience in the field and emphasizes on-the-job learning. In 2020, the Hood and Dartmouth Library also received an Andrew Mellon Foundation grant to advance significant cross-institutional and community-centered collaboration grounded in Dartmouth's Native American and Indigenous Arctic collections, which enabled the hiring of Natalia Whitecar, a collection information digitization specialist. Also, when I left the Hood, there were about 30 people, and now there are 52, so that gives you an idea of how much it's expanded. John has significantly expanded the museum's curatorial reach and its programs to enhance diversity and inclusion at the museum and in the museum profession as a whole. It is not an exaggeration that John has transformed the museum and brought new perspectives, voices, initiatives to invigorate what was already considered one of the foremost teaching museums in the country. Lastly, we're close to the end. John is at heart a curator. Museum directors and curators in this country pay close attention to what has been added to a museum's collection during a particular director's tenure. The slides that have been running on the screen show you some of the wonderful acquisitions John has personally added to the Hood's holdings, as well as some he was very involved in selecting with his curators. There have been many terrific acquisitions during his tenure, but these works point to his scholarship and affinities. In keeping with these interests, in 2008, John began to paint abstract canvases, a new direction that will be a focus during his post-Hood career. In celebration of his work in the last 8 years, there will be an exhibition of John's paintings at Lebanon's Ava Gallery and Art Center in June, and as a member of Ava's board, I invite you to the opening on Thursday, June 18th from 5 to 7 p.m. John's lecture today, How Did We Get Here? Thoughts on American Painting in the United States, will illuminate his thinking on a subject that is close to his heart and scholarship. Please join me in welcoming John Stomberg.
So, maybe I should just stop now. I don't know if I can actually live up to that amazing introduction. Kathy, thank you so much. It means a ton to me that you gave my introduction tonight. So the title, how did we get here? Yes, it's a play on the Talking Heads song, How Did I Get Here? And it refers to multiple we. And so I'm going to explain that in a moment. There's more than one we in that title. An American painting in the United States, it's an acknowledgement that our language is imprecise, and we often say American painting when we mean painting in the United States, when it could cover anything from Chile to Nunavut. So we're trying out different ways of explaining that. And so American painting in the United States seemed one way. I'm not purporting that that's the only way, but that's what I'm going to be talking about, is painting in the United States. So we. There's really three strands to we, like a good, challah. Although some of you maybe made challah before, and there's 6 strands to it. So yes, there's 3 hidden strands in this lecture, just like a challah. But the we is me. The staff asked me to do this talk to tee off the 250th anniversary of the United States shows, but they also said it's a time for you to talk a little bit about yourself and your path, so I'll do that. I'll go light. And then we is the American painting. How does the United States get here? And then the Hood Museum. How did we all get to where we are in our programming and our thoughts? And then I'm going to talk a little specifically about the 250th anniversary projects, which are on view now, and then collection building to wrap it up. We should have plenty of time for questions afterwards. So my story really starts in Boston, where this great Copley lives. There's a couple of other versions of it, but I grew up with this painting. So my lecture today is from Copley to Barber Takanaga. And so when you get back to Barber, you'll know we're getting to the end of the talk. It's about 3 hours from now, so buckle up. This is a picture that was just taken of me and appeared in a newspaper. And I thought, oh, I look so perplexed. And at first I thought, that's a terrible portrait. But then I realized, actually, the woman who took it is a reporter. And she got it kind of right. That is the way I look at art. I'm absolutely puzzled by art. And it takes engagement. It takes me a long time. I have to really look to figure out what's going on. So this was the last picture she took. And I think she finally thought, okay, there it is. That's the one I was after. This is a little bit of a talk about me. And I will tell you, my first art history professor had this problem about me. I wrote a 14-page paper for Professor Ruth Butler on modern sculpture. I was so proud, 14 pages. Man, that was like a lot of typing. It was typing back then. And when she handed it back, it was 2 separate bunches of papers. The first 7 pages stapled together, and the last, page 8 through 14. So 1 through 7, 8 through 14. And I'm like, what's going on? She said, well, pages 1 through 7, that's for you to think about. The art history starts on page 8. So rewrite it and start on page 8. But unapologetically, tonight I'm going to do a little bit of page 1 through 7. So be prepared. I was an art student, as Kathy mentioned, and 2 years into art school, I was at the Museum of Modern Art on a Sunday afternoon after a really long evening, Saturday night, the night before. If I remember correctly, it was Jules and the Polar Bears were in town that we saw. And anyhow, I'm there at the Modern, and they used to have the back steps, and this painting was hanging on the back steps, and I got halfway up the stairs, and I'm looking at this painting, and I had this profound realization, profound to me, that I would never be that good, that Hans Hofmann was amazing, that this painting was everything modern art should be, and I was in no way worthy of even thinking about doing this sort of thing. And it was a tough moment because I did go home and I did leave art school. And I did get a job as a chef, but mostly because the other chef quit. And the manager was like, you, Stomberg, right? You're chef. And I was like, don't I have to go to school or something? And they're like, no, you're cooking. Lunch at noon. So that's that story. But then I did end up going back to college and was studying art history. And in looking at this painting one day, the Hans Hofmann story shifted for me because I could see this great relationship between these two paintings. And suddenly, instead of feeling bad about the fact that I could see the Hans Hofmann, I started feeling good about myself for seeing the Hans Hofmann and realizing that there's a lot in common with this wonderful Winslow Homer. If you look at the big blue dress and the smaller red dress, the big blue square and the smaller red square, those are compositional properties that carry across. And there's a way of understanding the pictorial arts that is challenging. It's really difficult, but I started to feel like, okay, there is room for me in doing this kind of stuff, talking about art and talking about blue dresses and red dresses and blue rectangles and red triangles. So I ended up kind of following Emily Dickinson. And this is the first stanza of a 3-stanza poem, but I won't read the whole thing, I promise. I would not paint a picture. I'd rather be the one, its bright impossibility to dwell delicious on, and wonder how the fingers feel whose rare celestial stir evokes so sweet a torment, such sumptuous despair. I just love that. So in other words, I could be a looker rather than a maker of art. And I realized that I was a little bit like this book I read in high school. Now, everybody else read this book when they were kids, but I was kind of like in this nerdy set in high school, and we were all reading like The Bell Jar and Hamlet and talking about being nuts. And one of my friends brought out Horton, and we loved it because Horton hears something nobody else can hear. Only Horton hears that who. And he believes in himself, and he tells everybody, no, there really is a who. So I started to feel like Horton, and I thought, that's okay. And then, of course, when I got here, I discovered that Geisel had gone here, Theodore Geisel, Dr. Seuss had gone here, and Horton had been one of his creators, and actually in the collection of Dartmouth, we have the only oil painting that he made, and it's the first image of Horton right here. So it's like cosmic, right? It's all connected. I had to come here, and that's the full painting, which I'm not really addressing today because it doesn't fit in with the talk, the abduction of the Sabine women. But the important thing for today is Horton. So feeling like Horton, let's get into the second phase of the talk, now that I've established myself as a white elephant. American paintings, I'm dividing this part up into people, places, and things. You can start to see all these braids, because that's a good way of starting. And this great Homer painting is a good place to start. So this is Copley painting. John Singleton Copley, Watson and the Shark, 1778. I grew up with this painting. I knew all about it, all through high school, early college years. I love this painting. The hero, Watson, up there with his huge spear, about to save the day by stabbing the shark, and the young woman who's gone skinny dipping for some reason is about to get eaten by the shark, and I didn't really believe the spear was going to be in time. I never read the labels. Actually, back then, we didn't have wall text, so I went years thinking Watson was the guy with the harpoon. Watson's in the water. He's already missing his left leg, and this is a true story. He paid for this commission. He went on to be Lord Mayor of London, but at this point, he lost a leg, and his compatriots actually did save him. But this is this remarkable moment. It's so dramatic, and it's a paid portrait. I mean, this is like as revolutionary as Night Watch was in a way. And many people are helping out, and the literature on this painting is vast. That's why I'm saying this isn't so much an art history lecture, or I'd stop here and talk for 30 minutes about the literature on this painting, which is fascinating. But for me, what I learned was, oh, it does help to have somebody talking to you about the art, to explain it a little bit. Because I don't even know the guy's name who was holding the spear, actually. We just know Watson. So interspersed over the next slides, I'm going to do slides from the MFA, where I worked for a while, slides from Williams, slides from Mount Holyoke, and slides from Dartmouth. When they don't have a slide name, it's the hood. So this is one of Bonnie's great acquisitions, and it filled a hole for us, and we didn't have Hudson River painting. This is a delightful sort of New Eden view of the United States. It's Lake George, and this is a very polite painting in a way. It gives us a place to stand and to view it, and we can imagine ourselves right there in the scene. We could stand over here. There's a little drama going on. We've got the passing storm, and there's a lot written about the passing storm, and does it have relationships to social movements or political movements? It probably does. But the interesting thing about this in the context of Dartmouth scholarship is that there's no people here, and this was occupied by Native Americans for millennia, and there's nobody in this picture. It's just, so it's a very careful construction of nature made for an American audience that saw the United States as the New Eden. So Bonnie, thank you. This is an amazing acquisition, and so we tell that part of the story. And then I'm going to zigzag between museums to keep going on the story. Oh no, one more here. Other artists chose to go a more dramatic route. This is Gino, and this is our picture of New Hampshire, the White Mountains. Now, anybody who's ever been in the White Mountains might take this artist to task. You know, I kind of feel like these look more like the French Alps, he was French, than the White Mountains. We're not really that big. And you see the beautiful birds like down in the valley flying over to give this scale. I mean, this is an enormous painting that gives great national pride to place, pride of place. And that hangs in one of our shows upstairs too. We've also made a recent acquisition. Michael Hartman made this acquisition. Elizabeth Gilbert Jerome, not a household name, but Frederick Edmund Church's best student. And so this is very a la Church, a period of expansion, national expansion. This would be South America. At a time when American companies were beginning to operate in South America, and that has a tie-in to the demand for the kinds of paintings that were being sold in New York. It's really a terrific painting. It's kind of a twofer because you have that close-up in the front of all this great foliage and then a deep landscape in the back. So that gets us up to 1870. 1878, now this is WICMA, Williams College Museum of Art, where I used to work. This is just this great William Morris Hunt, Niagara Falls. And there's a couple of things going on here. First of all, it was in the wake of the 1876 centennial celebrations, and there were artists who were filling a need for exceptional stories about the United States. And Niagara Falls was one of those. This is an amazing set of falls, and they were celebrated. And there was also this tendency to want to make it even more dramatic by embracing a thought which was called the sublime. And that's a moment when you're really, really full of life, but also potentially close to death. And if you think about those moments like when you're at the top of a mountain and you're like right on the edge and you just feel exhilarated, but also a little frightened at the same time, you notice that Hunt hasn't given us anywhere to stand here. We're just floating over this landscape as though we could plunge over this incredible falls at any moment. And as a painting, it's just a tour de force. If you look closely, you can probably see, even in this slide, that there's little bits of rouge and red spots throughout, which make the blues and greens pop even more. Probably not based on visuals, but on a knowledge of painting, so to make this even more green and gray. So this is one of my favorites from WICMA from back in the day. And then this is one of my favorites from Mount Holyoke College Art Museum. This is the Saco Ford Conway Meadows by George Innes. And there's a little bit of faith leap in the last painting I showed you, the Niagara Falls. Like, we are potentially inconsequential in the face of natural forces which are much larger than we will ever understand. And that really comes out in Innes's painting here, he's a Swedenborgian, and he's looking at nature for signs that verify a spiritual realm. So why am I saying all this about this field? You have two people sitting there looking, and what are they looking at? They're looking at Mount Washington. But you don't see Mount Washington. You see clouds. It's obscured by the clouds. You have to have it on faith that there really is a mountain above that apron right there. And the world goes on around you regardless. And that was the way Innes talked about his paintings. And he wanted to imbue the natural world with the religiosity that he felt in his daily life. Really, truly remarkable painting. By the way, this was painted in 1876 and purchased by Mount Holyoke in 1876. It was contemporary art. They were just like, those ladies were so badass, they're going down to New York and they're buying contemporary art right out of the gallery. True story. And then this is our beautiful landscape. I'm moving into the 20th century. Landscape is a way of mapping on so many changing movements in art. And here we can see, imagine Picasso and a still life, Cubist still life. And Marguerite Zorak has taken that into account, making kind of realist cubism out of her landscape. It's a really stunning picture. And purchased before I got here, I'm pleased to say, but I would have bought it in a second because it does so much work for our collection. And then one of my old faves, this is from Williams, it's Grant Wood, Death on Ridge Road. And so I'm going to tell you that this is a religious picture. And at this point you're thinking, what the heck is he talking about? There's a couple of things. First of all, the fast car, which was like 9 model years later than the slow car, the slow and steady car staying in its lane, following the speed limit. Meanwhile, Mr. Speedy modern car goes zipping by, but guess what? He's on a head-on collision path with this great big red box truck, right? Red, he's gonna get crashed. There's no way he's gonna survive this. And just to reinforce that, there's a couple not so subtle signs of the religiosity of this painting. Do you see the telephone pole? Right? I mean, that's a pretty obvious symbol of what's going on here, and there's one over the assistants. But more subtle, if you look at the right-hand railings and look at the angle of the shadows. So the sun is coming, casting those shadows. Now look at the angle of the shadows on the opposite side of the road. That's a different light source. The heavens are already opening up for this guy. You know, the writing's on the wall. And this just is such a brilliant painting, and the crazy, wonderful perspective that Grant Wood was known for. This, I believe, was a picture that came to Williams through a gift of Cole Porter, of all things. So religiosity in American painting often makes an appearance when we least suspect it. But it is definitely a through line in a lot of the American paintings that we all show in our museums. And that actually was what it kind of inspired me to do that dissertation on Margaret Bourke White in Fortune magazine, because at Fortune magazine, business and industry were like a religion. And here's this great Calvin Coolidge speech. He was an Amherst grad, and he gave this speech at Amherst, but it ended up getting published in the 20s, 19 and then many times. The man who builds a factory builds a temple. The man who works there worships there, and to each is due not scorn and blame, but reverence and praise. I mean, this was the catchword for the Industrial Revolution in the United States. And here's a great Margaret Bourke White 1928 photograph inside the Otis Steel Mill. It's the photograph that Henry Luce saw when he decided to hire her for the infant magazine Fortune in 1928. He was still in Cleveland because that's where Time magazine was. He moved it to New York in 30. So here's a couple more of these images which establish kind of the awe, the religiosity and the awe of business, but also themes like standardization and infinite power come out in her photographs, a whole vocabulary that was established through her photographs for Fortune magazine, and we did, Bonnie again, acquire this amazing Oscar Blumner, an industrial scene. Blumner's themes are less awe and religiosity in the way that Bork Whitehead addressed it, and more having to do with labor. First of all, 1932, and red, white, and blue. There was a rash of red, white, and blue paintings in the United States in 1932. And actually, George O'Keeffe is quoted as saying, all the guys were painting red, white, and blue paintings. I wanted to paint one too, but this is Blumner. He wrote of this, the lingering power of nature to survive even under the onslaught of industrialization. But he was also very interested in labor, and he wrote about the red buildings as representing labor from a communist point of view. Very interesting. I mean, he loaded this painting with his ideas. Not all of them come out immediately. Unfortunately for Blumner, it was a very tough transition for him, coming from Germany, trying to establish himself as a German artist in the United States in between the wars. And yeah, he took his life before it was time. And then there was an approach to industry and the quietude of Charles Sheeler goes to making this picture seem like a sanctified place. It feels very much like that landscape that we were looking at, the George Inness with the people in the field. It's as though it's natural. And I can't help but thinking about Plato and like what lies beyond the river, you know, like what's behind the bend, what do we not know, and what can we know. And this was at the Courier when I worked there, my first museum job. See, I'm weaving me through it just a little bit. This is at the Courier Museum in Manchester, New Hampshire. So another theme that I think is really important in a lot of these pictures is isolation, and especially the other side of the Industrial Revolution. One side, we can celebrate industrialization and infinite production, but there was also a group of artists who looked at how that impacted individual people, what it was like to be alone in a city. And one of the best artists for this was Edward Hopper. This is Wickma's beautiful Edward Hopper. That's Jo, his wife. And it's just called Morning in the City. And she's standing in the sun, and yet she doesn't really feel warmed. You know, it doesn't feel like that's actually warming the room. And the bed seems too small. Like, how would she fit in that bed? And she's looking out beyond, and scholars have read the two shades as eyes, voyeuristically looking at her. Others have talked poetically about her thinking about escaping through the window. It's an endlessly wonderful picture and quintessential painting in the United States of this period, I think. So, Mount Holyoke College Art Museum again, another woman, another window. This is self-portrait. This is Dorothea Tanning still in the studio. Her husband, Max Ernst, dies in France in '76. She packs up her studio. This painting was halfway done. She rolls it up. She brings it to the United States and finishes it in the United States. It's the last of her kind of more purely surrealistic-y French-style paintings, and the first that gets kind of big. She goes on to paint much bigger paintings. We acquired this at Mount Holyoke right after she passed. It was a real stretch for us, but a terrific, I mean, she almost makes that watercolor set looks like it is part of her body. And this sensuous melting body forms is really typical. And you can see that's not New York out the window, it's still Paris. So that part of the work had been done while she was in Paris. But she finishes it here and calls it still in the studio. So it's very much an American painting about her time here. So there's so much to say about the window as a metaphor, about being naked in a space and being unprotected, and being viewed, and sensuality, and all of these wonderful topics that come up in our museums and give us so much to talk about in the galleries. And then this is more of a portrait now. So now we're talking about that balance between the artist and the sitter. And this is Marguerite Zorak again. And you can see she's checked some of her more aggressive compositional style, in this case, so that she can bring out more of the sitter. In this case, I'm thinking really the nanny, Ella Madison, is the subject, and Dalov, the baby, is sort of an uncomfortable accoutrement to this woman's life. But it's a penetrating portrait, and also allows us to start hearing the voices of many people who aren't necessarily represented usually in museum collections. This is our beautiful Cecilia Beau, moving on with portraits. This is Charles Darwin's niece. And Cecilia Beau was a painter, and in this case, a pastel artist, and Bonnie brought this into the collection. She's got a penetrating gaze and that dark background, which really makes her face just jump off the canvas for us as she looks and kind of engages just beyond us. She kind of looks beyond us. And then I've got to point out the green on either side. The green is brilliant because it brings the whole composition back together in the center and allows us to focus on her head. And then this is our Alice Neal. And one of the things I find so remarkable about this one is, yeah, it's a portrait of a white guy, but it's like he's in jeans and a t-shirt. He's a college-age kid and friends with Alice Neal's nephew, I think is the story. Is that right, Alice? Son? Friend of Neal's? Anyhow, close. There was a relationship here. But Alice Neal was known for using really large brush strokes and being brutally honest. Like, nobody comes out looking beautiful in an Alice Neal portrait, and that's one of the things that we absolutely love for it. And you can feel the tension in the hands on his lap and his shorts, which are a little too tight. It's a brilliant portrait, again, with a window. And then this is a recent acquisition. This is, I think, one of the first, no, not the first. Alma Thomas was the first, but I bought this from Toyin, which I've misspelled. I missed a Y. I'm sorry about that. This is her brother, and I asked her why she depicted her brother, and she said, because he didn't charge me a model fee. I expected because he's got deep emotional content in his eyes. But she's got a very unique way of depicting flesh as a whole series of highlights and multiple parallel strokes. And, you know, it's a brilliant portrait to look at. So in portraits, I think you have to balance the maker, and you can feel a lot of Toyin in this picture. You know, she's very present in the depiction of this man, and the sitter, and you get a good sense of the sitter as well with his gold jewelry, of which he is clearly proud. So this gives you a sense of the range of the collection of portraits that we've put together here at the Hood. And I think it's a range that we can be proud of. We have others, but that's a good place to stop with people. So I did places and then people. Now this is things. It's a short part. Still life has often been a way to aggrandize wealth and stature. And you show off how much stuff you have and how beautiful your silver is, or this exquisite porcelain, and you've got enough money in 1820 to have peaches and pears and grapes. I mean, it's an ostentatious picture, absolutely exquisitely painted by James Peale from the famous Peale family of artists from Philadelphia. We still buy still lifes, but they tend not to look like that anymore. This is this beautiful Susan Walp grapefruit with black ribbon. This is, to me, a very modern picture. It's emphasizing the paint and the areas of color over the subject. I mean, it's not a very grapefruity grapefruit. It's more of a stylized grapefruit. And the positioning is both convincing and not convincing. But that was hardly the point, because it's a composition of colors and textures and forms on a canvas. And that's the emphasis here in modern art. But we even bought a still life recently. And now we're getting quite contemporary. And we've really moved away from high style, silver, and china. This is Wendy Park's army soup. And army soup was a tradition in Korea where you would blend Spam and other ingredients and make your soup. And because the army always had Spam. So this big, beautiful picture has been on view 3 or 4 times already. And it shares a whole different set of values for us and does a lot of work. Even though she references, do you see the paper towel roll? Like leaning out over the table, standard trope in old still life was to have a knife kind of coming off the table to really strut your stuff. But the Spam really does it for me in this picture. I think it's just absolutely delightful. So that's the collection that we've been building. Now I want to talk a little bit about the Hood Museum. I'm showing you a picture of Samson Occam, who, when I first got here, I hadn't even heard of yet. Pardon me. But I'll get back to Samson in a minute. This is our portrait of Eliezer Wheelock, who's long celebrated as the founder, the solitary founder of Dartmouth College. And if you look at this picture, you see the great landscape out back. That's a tradition in portraits called the magisterial gaze. In other words, this person is in charge of all that he sees in the distance. Time has gone by. Wheelock was supposed to found a college that was dedicated to the education of Native Americans. And it didn't go so well. In fact, we had only done a handful by 1971. But this was our John Singleton Copley in our collection. It's Governor Wentworth, painted in 1769. He gave the land grant to Dartmouth College when Lord Dartmouth said, sure, they can have that land, that's fine, because he had this vast tract up here. But Samson Occam was co-founder of Dartmouth College, and the entire time that Wheelock was organizing to make the school, Occam was in England raising money. He raised a vast amount of money. And when he came back and saw that there weren't Native Americans at Dartmouth, he was really upset. And he wrote a nasty letter and said, I'm out of here. And he moved to the Midwest. So recently, really starting with this guy, John Kemeny, Dartmouth has tried to take very seriously as its role as educators of Native Americans. This is a Ray Kinsler portrait, by the way. Ray was a wonderful portraitist. It's not an easy task to be a painter of contemporary portraits because there's a lot of pressure on it to be arty, but then you leave behind the sitter. He did a very good job of capturing Kemeny, who founded the Native American department and started a program where we have Native American students here all the time. And sometimes we're called the Native Ivy. Anyhow, I don't mean to step on him, but since '71, Occam's role has been growing, and we're just debuting a film now that argues that they're full partners in this, and they should be seen as such. Occam was Native American. He was very invested in the Native American side of things, which is something that we are now very invested in. And upstairs, you will see, for example, this Nampeo pot, built sometime between 1900 and 1910. I mean, if this isn't the first example of modernism in the United States, or at least of abstraction, geometric abstraction in this pot is astounding. And Nampeo was the grandmother and mother and great aunt to a whole family of artists, including this guy, Dan Domingo, who you'll see upstairs. And this is a contemporary abstract painting, painted just in 2023, that Jamie let me bring into the collection. Points converging. And the thing I love about it is not only is it a brilliant composition, and you can think about it in the context of Bauhaus style abstraction, but it's called Points Connecting for a reason. His hope for the future is that we realize that without each other, we're lost. The only way forward is us to remember we're all connected. So if you look at this again, you'll see that if you are a black arch or a yellow triangle or a black triangle, you're all connected. Every form in this picture is connected to every other form in this picture. And that's what he says is the hope for the future. So we have a commitment, and these are both on view right now in the galleries in the show, called Always Already, Abstraction in the United States. And we also bought this amazing Kent Monkman painting. We asked Kent to come in and mine the collection. We thought for sure he was going to take a landscape and put Mischief into the landscape. Instead, he said, I want to do the Rothko and your Cyrus Dallin. And it's that mining of the collection that we encouraged. And this is an example of a past project of mining the collection when Fred Wilson made the bronze on the right after the plaster cast of the left, which was just called Pygmy, and he had a name, Otabenga. So Fred's project was to return the name to Otabenga and cover up the word Pygmy. And that's how we ended up with this incredible Kent Monkman painting. So our Native American collection really does go to traditional pottery, to very, very contemporary art. That's Mischief Eagle Testicle on the horseback. So a couple of 250th anniversary projects, and then I'll wrap it up. We have this show on abstraction where we're comparing things like this George O'Keeffe and this Kay Walking Stick, and looking at the great kind of synergy between these two pictures. And that's one of the things that we do here at the Hood. We look for commonality. We emphasize commonality. We're all people. We could emphasize difference, and that is an approach to art history. Classic art history is compare and contrast, but we tend to look for comparisons. We tend to look for ways in which we're all in the same boat. He says, putting up the May Stevens. May Stevens' major feminist artwork, 1968. Very proud to have this painting. It's a Big Daddy paper doll. He can be a cop, a butcher, a soldier, or an executioner. You choose the outfit. But we also have him next door to Michael Naranjo's He's My Brother, which Michael Naranjo is a Native American vet, blew up in the Vietnam War, lost his arm, lost his eyesight, and started working in clay as therapy, and makes these sculptures one-handed and blind. And this is a recollection of the fellow who carried him off the battlefield. So we have these side by side, you know, the toxic masculinity approach to Vietnam veterans, or the He's My Brother approach to veterans. And this was purchased in honor of James Wright, past president of Dartmouth College, who long before it was popular was a supporter of veterans' rights here on campus, a very early supporter of veterans. We also have this Benny Andrews witness lined up with William Rembert. So witness has witnessed some terrible things in the civil rights era. William Rembert lived an extraordinarily tough life, but remembered things fondly in his memory later on. So this is his memory of picking cotton as a child. So this can be a real problem, these two approaches to African American history. They're really divergent, and yet the conversation they strike and they allow us to have is quite important. Standard Station, icon of American pop art. Standardization. This is one of the things he was after. There's a pork white photograph. The idea that we could make plow blades infinitely was the promise for the future. It was a utopian ideal. By the time we get to the 50s, it was a scary idea that we are all the same gas tank. So this is like standard station, standardized people. It was a push for independence in the guise of pop art, much the way Joan Quick-to-See Smith's painting looks at the icon of the chief and allows that it has become diminished so that it's read in the same way a logo would be read. So these two paintings, and you both using pop art, are on view upstairs to explore the way that popular media, popular images can have deep impact on all of us in political and social ways. I think I better hurry up. Here's some things we bought. Dorothea Tanning, I was thrilled. This was already here. We did not have a strong collection of women painters here. My predecessors were working on that, and it's a baton that I picked up. And we have acquired Deborah Remington, this amazing abstract. Up top, it looks like a still life, and down below, we look like we're floating in space. It's a remarkable painting. Helen Frankenthaler, an acquisition I'm truly proud of. We had Jackson Pollock, Robert Motherwell, Adolf Gottlieb. We had the whole gang, but we didn't have Helen Frankenthaler, which is absolutely key. So that's on view. This is my very first acquisition, so now I'm going to get sentimental. When I got here, the provost, I was negotiating for this for my last job, but my boss said I could buy it for us. So I bought this as soon as I got here. This beautiful Alma Thomas. Jay DeFeo, Michael and I went right to the estate for this beautiful Jay DeFeo abstract. More recently, I put in this Hung Lu painting, which has got a complicated iconography, but it asserts pride in Chinese nationalism. I'm hurrying a little bit. And the great Julie Meritu. We just heard that we might be the only college or university museum in the country who has a Julie Meritu painting. Great acquisition. Look at these details. It's just stunning. I'm wrapping up, I promise. Scheherazade Garcia, splendid painting. And then I'm going to wrap up with this this Barbara Takanaga painting, 2 for Bonteque, because where I want to leave this is a little metaphysical. So Barbara started painting these paintings, wondering where her mother, who was suffering from Alzheimer's, was. Where are you when you now are no longer communicative and you've got Alzheimer's? And you're somewhere betwixt and between. It's a contemplation of the infinite. And so, yeah, that's me. Now we're back. I told you when I get to the Barbara Takanaga, I'm wrapping up. I look at that painting and I'm just in awe. I'm just like, who are we? Where do we go? You look at this great cosmos. And her technique is fascinating. She paints and dribbles and pours and spatters and then goes back in with little brushes and works out these incredibly detailed bits. And 2 for Bonteque, it's based on a Lee Bonteque sculpture, and she's drawn that in there. And so this was a commission originally for Rockefeller Estate. But the details are absolutely exquisite, and you can almost imagine yourself at one with the universe, with Louise Cage just flying out there in the cosmos, right? It's just kind of an incredible thought. And art is able to embrace things that we can't answer. We don't know, and that's wonderful. And art is able to give us mystery again in a world that sometimes lacks mystery. And art can provide, not answers, but suggestions, evocations of possible truths. Just look at these. You got to go upstairs. We're open till 7 tonight, so go upstairs and have a look at this painting. So, I almost didn't do this, but my staff said it's okay. Kathy already plugged the show. So I'm really worried about the world, and I take that out on my painting. And I'm worried that people are forgetting the importance of empathy. If we don't have empathy, we're not human. There is no understanding of empathy without understanding what humans are. That is what we are about. And so I worry that the world needs repair. So I took up this theme, this wonderful theme in Judaism, Tikkun Olam, which is world repair. And it has a very pragmatic social meaning, like do well, help people out, reach out, support each other, connect. It also has a beautiful spiritual meaning, which is that there was a moment where our spiritual connectivity to God was severed, it was challenged. And through a life of spirituality, you can reconnect. And so we have a duty through Tikkun Olam to both do spiritual repair and social repair. It's a beautiful concept. But I couldn't figure out how to paint it. So I turned to kintsugi, which is the Japanese form of ceramic repair, where a broken pot gets repaired with beautiful gold lacquer. And now what was broken is whole again, while also containing all the signs of its demise. But it's whole again. So I put this huge swath through the middle, and that's kintsugi, and that's joining earth and heaven. And there I am way over in the far right, a little self-portrait as yellow triangles, trying to bridge the gap between heaven and earth. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, don't you have questions? I do have time for questions. What? We don't have questions? Okay. I got to take one question. What are you going to do, fire me?
Oh,
Yeah.
the photograph you showed of yourself.
The best art of the day.
Well, that was the journalist who took that. You look just like Frank Gehry.
Oh. Wow. We better stop there. But before you go, I just wanted to acknowledge somebody who can't be here tonight, Winky Kelsey. I am the Virginia Rice Kelsey 1961S director, and I've always been so honored to have my name come from a benefactor who's an artist. And I think that we really connect on that. And Pete Kelsey is an amazing guy, a reverend. So my benefactors were basically a reverend and an artist. And I found that delicious. So I just wanted to send out a thank you to them. And again, to all my staff, because everything I did here tonight, I showed you. I mean, I'm just the figurehead. They do all the work. So thank you to the amazing staff of the Hood Museum of Art. And now let's go party.